Pedepsele pe care regimul de la Teheran le aplică celor care au îndrăznit să se revolte împotriva lui continuă. Problemele Iranului rămân aceleași, ba chiar s-au agravat. Rămâne și întrebarea dacă vom mai vedea sau nu o intervenție din partea Statelor Unite. Discutăm toate scenariile cu dr. Raz Zimmt de la Institutul de Studii de Securitate Națională din Israel. Sunt Cristina Cileacu, începe Pașaport diplomatic. Dr. Raz Zimmt, Director of Iran and Shiite Axis Research Program for the Institute for National Security Studies Israel, welcome to Diplomatic Passport.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Dr. Zimmt, we are talking about Iran because we saw from the beginning of this year protests, massive protests in Iran. Then we saw a violent crackdown of these protests. We saw an imminent intervention that never come from United States, and the situation now seems calm. But is it so?
Well, I think it's calm when you refer to the current status of demonstrations in Iran, which is quite understandable due to the brutal repression of the demonstrations in the last two weeks. But I think we have to remember that all the problems which initiated this last wave of protests in Iran since the end of December are still there. The economic crisis, the shortages of water, electricity, the crisis of legitimacy suffered by the Iranian regime, the growing gap between the regime and the Iranian population, all those problems and crises are still there. I would even say that they became even worse after this repression. And so I think the question is not whether we will see at some point the renewal of those protests in Iran, but when. I think this is the main question right now.
We saw that the population, it was not well organized. People were upset because mainly of the economical situation. But then again, the population in Iran is quite diverse. They don't have a leader because some of them are ideologically closer to the regime. Others have religious beliefs stronger than the others. Most of them, of course, suffer because of the restrictions. There are minorities as well in Iran. Who can organize such a protest, if somebody can do that, in order to change the regime, but also to keep Iran steady?
So I certainly agree with you. One of the problems of this wave of protests, and this is not the first time we see this problem, is the lack of organization and the lack of leadership. But we have to remember that as for this stage of protests, it is important to have some kind of leadership or organization, but I think it's more important when you try to move forward to the next stage of protest, which is to topple the Iranian regime and then to come up with an alternative. I don't think it's vital to have a national leadership at this stage, but certainly it imposes much constraints on the ability of the so-called opposition to overcome the state and the regime in Iran. I do think that if we have millions of Iranians in the streets and representatives of different sections of the Iranian society working together, workers and teachers and bazaar merchants and students and women and ethnic minorities working together, even if there is no united leadership or some kind of national organization, this might be enough to move forward to the next stage. But I think that one of the things we haven't seen, and this is also a very important condition to have some kind of regime change in Iran, is to see some cracks and divisions within the state, within the security and political elite in Iran, and that's something we haven't seen.
But do you think somebody will appear? Because we know that the regime in Iran is not a monolith. There are layers. People that are actually leading Iran are not necessarily agreeing with each other. Do you see as an expert somebody that might come up in front of all this and maybe lead towards the fall of the actual regime?
So I think we have to make the distinction between two main scenarios. One is a regime change, which means a revolutionary change from below. And in this case, I would assume that at some point we might see an Iranian activist, perhaps someone from among the political prisoners right now in Iran, who might be able to become a national leader. It's very difficult to pinpoint to one of those because, as you know, the Iranian state have made considerable efforts to repress any kind of leadership which might become an alternative. So that's one scenario. The second scenario is to see not a regime change, but a change from within the regime, which means that someone from the political or security elite inside Tehran will reach the conclusion that the only way to survive, or the only way to make sure that the Islamic Republic continues to exist, is by some kind of change from within, meaning to take the Supreme Leader Khamenei out of his office and then replace him with someone else. I don't see this happening at the current circumstances. I think that currently the political and security elite in Iran doesn't feel that there is an immediate threat to the stability of the regime. But at some point, if they do feel threatened by the demonstrations or by the possibility of a U.S. intervention, we might see either a politician or a high-ranking general trying to take control over the establishment in Iran.
Do you still think it's possible an U.S. intervention? We know that was imminent, at least Donald Trump said so. At some point, it was an information that even Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, called Trump not to attack Iran. Also, a lot of leaders from the Middle East managed to somehow downgrade this intervention. But do you think we can still witness a strong, powerful attack coming from United States against Iran?
Certainly. I certainly think so. I think that what prevented President Trump from implementing his willingness to strike Iran was two main factors. One is the assessment shared with him that it's going to be very difficult to topple the Iranian regime at this point, unless the U.S. is committed to use all its military force, which is still not there in the Middle East. And the other thing was the Israeli and the Arab states' concern from the possibility of escalation, of regional escalation, which might affect not just Israel, but the Gulf states as well. And so what I think we see over the last few days is a concentration of U.S. forces in the Middle East, which might enable President Trump to decide on different scenarios of how to deal militarily with Iran if necessary. I don't know if he's going to do that, but at least we can certainly reach a point in a matter of days which will allow President Trump to make decisions which were more difficult to make a week ago.
So we can still say that Iran is very much in the focus of United States.
Certainly, and I think the Iranians realize that when you look at the threats made by Iranian officials, including in the last few days, it's very evident that the Iranians take the U.S. threats very seriously. Again, I think we have to ask ourselves, and this is the question which is being asked in the U.S., what kind of military strike we are talking about, whether it's a strike, a more comprehensive strike, which might attempt to topple the Iranian regime. It's going to be, in my view, very difficult, especially due to the fact that currently, as we said, there is no evident demonstrations inside Iran. But there is also a possibility that the U.S. might try to do in Iran what it did in Venezuela, meaning some kind of change from within the regime, perhaps by removing Supreme Leader Khamenei and having someone else from within the political establishment in Iran replacing him in a kind of evolving into a different kind of model, governmental model in Iran instead of the current one.
The current regime in Tehran pointed a finger towards Donald Trump and Netanyahu both, saying that they were involved, of course, the United States and Israel, in the organizing this protest we saw in the beginning of the year. Were they involved in these protests?
First of all, I'm old enough to remember that this is the type of allegations made by the Iranians over the last 20 years. Already back in 1999, and during the students' riots in Iran, and then the Green Movement in 2009, and throughout all the waves of protest erupting in Iran in recent years, it was always the Iranian claim, mostly made by Supreme Leader Khamenei, that those were initiated and supported by foreign elements, by foreign enemies, most importantly the US and the Zionist regime, as they refer to Israel. I cannot rule out, of course, the possibility that the US or Israel were somehow involved in some of the events in Iran. But at the end of the day, we have to realize that the initiative and the reasons for all the waves of protests in Iran is the lack of Iranian support, Iranian population support to the Islamic Republic of Iran, and the really significant crisis, economic crisis, and the collapse of the national infrastructures in Iran, mostly the electricity and the water. All those problems are the main reason for what we've seen in Iran over the last few years. And so even if there was certain foreign involvement, this is certainly not the main reason to understand and to explain this wave of protests.
After the last year, 12 days war between Iran and Israel, Iran looks like it increases its stocks of bombs and defense capabilities. Do you agree with this observation?
So here again, we have to make a distinction between three main issues. One is the nuclear issue, or the nuclear project. Here we haven't seen significant progress made by Iran since the 12-day war. There were some construction works in certain facilities related to the nuclear program, but currently Iran is still not enriching uranium. Iran has not yet reconstituted the three main facilities which were attacked by Israel and the US in Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan. So here we haven't seen any real progress made. The main progress was made in the missiles, in the ballistic missiles capacities. Here, we certainly see progress made by Iran to try and rehabilitate the damage caused to their missiles capacities, both in terms of qualities and also quantities. I'm not sure that they have reached the level they were before the 12-day war, but it's not surprising to assume that they are making a lot of efforts to reconstitute those capabilities due to the fact that ballistic missiles is the only way for Iran to deter and retaliate in case of a US or Israeli strike. The last thing is, of course, the aerial defense systems. Here again, we know that the Iranians are making some efforts to improve their capacities, including by reaching out to both Russia and China. But here again, we haven't seen any real progress made in their attempts to improve their capabilities.
Prime Minister Netanyahu is a very old critic of Iran. He explained many years the problem that Iran poses for the Middle East. So we can assume that an Iran that is destabilized will be in the advantage of Israel, but will be in the advantage of Iranian people.
I certainly agree that Israel considers today the change of the Iranian regime as its ultimate goal. But I also think that Israel realized that it's going to be very difficult to topple the Iranian regime only through military foreign intervention. And so what we've seen over the last few weeks is an Israeli attempt to let the US lead this campaign against Iran since the beginning of the protests in Iran. And so we should not expect Israel to play a direct role in those attempts. The Israeli main concerns is with the Iranian attempts to reconstitute both its ballistic missiles capacities and perhaps in the future also to weaponize or to improve its nuclear program capabilities. In this case, Israel might certainly consider a second round of war with Iran. But I think one of the conclusions in Israel, especially after the 12-day war, is the fact that none of the problems we have with Iran and none of the threats imposed to Israeli national security by Iran have been resolved. We still see Iran attempting to increase its missiles capacities. The nuclear program is still there, although much degraded since the war. Iran is still making a lot of efforts to support its allies and proxies in the region, most importantly Hezbollah. And so it's a common belief in Israel that the only way to deal with those problems is through a regime change. But again, we understand that it depends mostly on the Iranian people.
You are an expert in Iran, so I have to ask you if the possibility of Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah, to rule Iran, if this current regime will fall one way or another, is a real possibility.
So I have to be honest with you. I was a little surprised with the level of support given to Reza Pahlavi during the recent wave of protests in Iran. But I still think that there is a difference between all those slogans in favor of reestablishing the monarchy in Iran and perhaps giving support to Reza Pahlavi as a kind of antithesis to this Islamic Republic of Iran. I think it mostly reflects the level of despair and crisis of legitimacy of the Islamic Republic of Iran. I'm not sure that it reflects a genuine support given by the majority of the Iranian people inside Iran to the idea that Reza Pahlavi, who haven't been in Iran in the last 47 years, will be able to lead Iran. But I do think that the despair and the sense that the situation in Iran today is so bad that they are ready to accept almost anyone who might become an alternative to the current regime inside Iran.
You mentioned earlier that Iran is turning towards Russia and China to get help in order to increase its capabilities. But do you think that in a case of, let's say, attack coming from the United States and a prolonged war or something like that, will China in this case support Iran? Because we know China is investing not much, but increasing its investment in the Belt and Road Initiative, in particular in Iran, the former Silk Road. So the current regime is in favor of China. Will China somehow support under the table, let's say, this current regime if something bad happens against the regime?
I think it's quite unlikely. I mean, China certainly wants to preserve the stability in Iran. It was certainly against the 12-day war in June, and it certainly doesn't want to see any instability in Iran following the possible collapse of this current regime. But we have to remember that most of the Chinese support to Iran is economic one. China buys about 90% of the oil exports from Iran. There were some attempts by the Iranians to get some military support from the Chinese. There were some attempts by China. Some of them were stopped by the US to deliver dual-use technologies, which could be used for the production of ballistic missiles. But at the end of the day, we haven't seen much Chinese commitment to support Iran from the military or direct military point of view. It's not just because of their concern with what the US might say, but also because we have to remember that most Chinese business in the Middle East concentrate in the Arab Gulf states, not in Iran. And therefore, I'm not sure that Iran should expect direct Chinese support in Iran, even if in case of a US military intervention.
Dr. Zimmt, thank you so much for your analysis.
Thank you.
Atât pentru astăzi, dar rămânem în continuare online pe pagina de Facebook a emisiunii și pe conturile noastre de X și Instagram. Revenim cu subiecte noi din lumea diplomației și a politicii externe, vinerea viitoare de la 11:30 și în reluare sâmbătă după miezul nopții. La revedere!